everyone, and welcome to Voices of Introspection. I'm Harini Balachandar, your host, and someone who's endlessly curious about the journeys of personal growth and transformation. On this podcast, I dive deep into conversation with coaches and leaders to explore the pivotal moments and introspective practices that have shaped their lives. Today, I'm thrilled to have Chere with us. She is a certified coach, a meditation teacher, and a breathwork facilitator with over 17 years of personal meditation practice. Chere's story is one of incredible transformation, from leading teams in senior roles of Fortune 500 companies and serving as president of a mental health organization to carving out a new path as a coach. Along the way, she earned a reputation for her empathetic and inspiring leadership, creating workplaces where people don't just work, they thrive. Now, she's using all that experience to guide others in their journey. And like many of us, she's also a parent navigating life with two teenagers in southern New Jersey. Oh, and unofficially doubling as the family's Uber driver. In this episode, we are going to learn more about Chere's fascinating journey from corporate leadership to coaching, how introspection has played a role in her evolution, and the wisdom she shares with her clients. Let's jump right in with Chere as we uncover her unique path and insights. Hello, Chere. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I know meditation and coaching have had such a profound impact on many lives, and I'm excited to dive deeper into your journey. To kick things off, can you share your transition story from corporate leadership roles to becoming a coach, meditation teacher, and a breathwork facilitator?
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege to talk with you today and tell a little bit about my story. So my corporate career spans over 30 years. I had a lot of different roles, but I started meditating about 17 years ago, and that was when I was pregnant with my son, my first and only pregnancy, and my husband at that time and I separated, and I filed for divorce 11 days after he was born. So someone recommended meditation to me as a way of managing the stress and the heartache and what were very difficult times. And it literally saved my life and transformed my life. So I started practicing more. I started going on retreats. I started, collecting different teacher certifications in different disciplines over the years. And then last year, I was on a retreat in Costa Rica, and this was actually an ayahuasca retreat, a little different than the silent retreats I typically do. But we just happened to do breath work the first night. And when I go on a silent retreat, a typical meditation retreat, I'm in complete silence for 7 days. I'm completely cut off from the outside world unless there's an emergency. And what happens in my experience at those moments and during those weeks is that because you have no distractions, you have very profound feelings and maybe issues that you weren't dealing with or coming up, and you're kind of forced to face them. It can be a wonderful week, but a difficult week. And I found that an hour and a half of this breath work felt like the same as a 7 week silent retreat. It was that profound and having a shift in my heart and my mind. And so I started doing that when I came home, with the same teacher who taught us in Costa Rica. I'd already gotten a coaching certification. And I decided, I just wanted to have a career that felt like it had more of a personal sense of purpose for me and what I could be helpful in doing in this world.
That makes a lot of sense. I completely agree. I think silence and stepping out of your comfort zone to experience something new can really bring a lot to a surface, right? It's such a powerful way to gain perspectives. So, what inspired you to leave a successful corporate career? You mentioned personal challenges like the separation you went through, which I imagine were pivotal, but leaving behind a thriving corporate career is an entirely different leap. So, looking back, were there defining moments during your corporate journey that signaled it was time for a shift?
Yeah, I think it grew over a period of time. In one sense, I was the founding president of a business that I created from scratch inside a much larger Fortune 500 company. And that was, I don't know, many years ago, 14 years ago or so. So I was maybe about 3.5, 4 years into my meditation practice at that time. And I started bringing those types of practices into my work life, and blending that a little bit, and blending that into my leadership. Um, and more time passes. My last role was president of a company, a startup company, separate from that role. And I resigned in 2023. I quit without any other backup or any other plan in place. I've never done that in my life in 30 years, more than 30 years, since, I've probably been working continually since I was 16. But I had made a decision that I was a person who was very clear on my values, and that role was not in alignment. And then I took some time off, and then I went on that retreat. And then after some reflection, I just said, okay, it's time to do what you think you've always wanted to do, And when I look back at when I make big decisions in life, and I can talk more about this, but it's partly analytical, it's partly having some, strong inner sense of myself and what's important to me, and how I can serve. And I kind of combine all of those things before I take a leap, because I've had a lot of different jobs over the years. So taking this leap for this one was a very personal one. But I decided, it was just time.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I'd love to I'd love to hear more about how your meditation and introspection practices have influenced your leadership style in the corporate environment. I think your corporate experience is incredibly valuable, especially for women today. It's so important to understand where the fine line is, how we can bring our authentic selves to work, while also navigating the need to present a more professional persona in the corporate world, right? So, how did you strike that balance between authenticity and professionalism in your leadership journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I started really bringing that version of myself to work when I became the head of that startup. And at that time, I was a single mom, and my son was about 3.5. And I I decided that, and I don't think I really decided. I think I just started embracing what I knew to be true, and that when you bring your whole self to work, and as a leader, when you can be vulnerable and transparent, like, you're going to engender trust with your team. And whenever I find something that is so profound that helps me so much, I want to share it with people that I care about. So I started talking about it, at work, and in my roles. And in later years, I started offering, weekly meditation sessions when I was the head of certain organizations. And yeah, and I think it's hard, right? Like, it's hard to have a big career, and a contemplative practice, and go on silent retreats, and have a toddler, and be a single mom. It's hard to balance all of those things. And I think because I was, kind of bringing this mindset to work, for one thing, in starting a startup, because I was true to myself when I was recruiting people to come to my team. They were clear about my values and what my type of leadership was going to look like, and it was a little different from what many people had experienced at that point. And so I attracted the right people, right? So we were pretty aligned in terms of our values. And that startup started with myself and one other gentleman, and then it was a few people, and then it was over 70 people, and went on for several years. And what I think these practices at work are so critical, because as a leader, your number one job as a leader is to make great decisions, right? That doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but you've got to make the best possible decision that you can. And when you're doing things that are cutting edge or innovative that have never been done before, like, it's great to have data-based decision making, and there's lots of data out there that can help set a direction. But um, you often have to trust your own internal compass and your instincts, and kind of mine, your experience from all of these years, and have the courage to just make a decision, because not making a decision is making a decision. And so, also talking about in my leadership style and owning my own process of these practices help you manage fear, right? And fear is natural to feel in the corporate environment, especially when you're running a startup and you're a single mom. It's very natural. But you can't make decisions from fear. You have to recognize that it's there, but have a practice that can help you be calm and clear and see clearly. So you're making the best decision in the moment. And then if you find out a little later that you've made the wrong decision, the self-awareness that comes from this practice helps you step up and say, hey, I made a mistake, or we made a mistake, we need to pivot. It's time to shift directions, and not get caught up in trying to be right about anything that you've done, right? Like, it's better to learn from your mistakes and move forward.
That's such a great insight. Better to learn from your mistakes and move forward. Speaking of moving forward, you mentioned navigating through fear, reflecting on it, and pushing ahead. Do you have a specific example where you felt truly scared, but your introspection or meditation practices helped you work through it? Perhaps a moment where you found clarity and realized the way forward despite the fear? I'd love to hear about the time when you experienced that light at the end of the tunnel.
That probably happened on a daily basis, and I probably have so many stories, but I'm going to tell you a slightly funny one. Um, I was working in I've worked in different sizes corporations. This was a really big one. And a new executive came on who was very high level. And he had a tactic of laughing at you when you were in meetings to try to make you uncomfortable. And it was happening a lot to a lot of people. And I would be on these meetings, and someone would talk and he would disagree, and he would audibly laugh on the call. And some other executives sometimes didn't handle it so well, and there were a few that would lose their temper and get really angry, and that just spiraled out of control. And I would counsel them and say, like, you're giving him what he wants, like, you can't let this get under your skin, right? And so this executive reached out to me and wanted a meeting, wanted me to explain something my team was working on. And so we had a one-on-one, and I think it was like a Monday. And I started explaining it and explaining the technology and how it would work. And he started laughing. And, I'm a meditation teacher. I can sit for a week and say nothing. So I just went silent. I just stayed
Wow. Yeah.
silent, and he stopped laughing, and it was still silent. And he finally said, "Are you still there? Are you on the call?" And I said, "Yes, I am on the call. You requested this meeting. You seem to be laughing while I'm talking. That tells me you don't actually want to hear the information that I'm giving. So I think we should conclude the meeting. And I think there's probably not a purpose to us to continue to talk." And at that point, he took a step back and he said, "Well, listen, these are my issues with this." I said, "Okay, let's talk about your issues. Like, let's start to work with that." And so we had a much better conversation. And then later that week, we were on a larger call, and he was being so nice to me, and he was praising my team in front of all these other people. And someone on my team, a director, texted me. She's like, "What did you do? like what has happened?" Right.
Uh-huh.
And to your point of being a woman and being yourself at work, I'm going to be honest and say the gentleman at work that would lose their temper in these instances, we're forgiven for that. A woman would not be forgiven for that. Right. A woman cannot lose her temper at work. That's not seen as okay. And I'd also say that, I'm not going to pretend I always am calm and collected. No one is, not even the Dalai Lama, right? But to cultivate a practice that allows you more times than not to respond rather than react in a more wise way is going to lead to a better career and certainly a better life. And I think that's what helped me that day, because a lot of people were very afraid of him. But I think, you're always going to have moments in your career and life that are difficult with people who are going to be challenging for whatever reason. And the only thing you can ever control is your response. That's the only thing that you can have mastery over.
That is such a powerful perspective, mastering your response when so much else is beyond your control. I'm genuinely impressed by the grit you demonstrated in that moment. It's incredibly difficult to stay composed and not react, especially when dealing with a high level executive. Many people would avoid any kind of conflict in such situation. But you stood your ground and confidently asserted what you believed was right for you. That's truly inspiring, Shari. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and you have to have a sense of humor because once he started laughing, I thought, "Oh, I've seen this show before. Like I've been to this movie. I expected
Uh-huh.
this is what was going to happen." So,
Yeah, absolutely. So now, flipping the coin a bit, imagine you had the opportunity to coach this high level executive. How would you help them develop self awareness, especially if their behavior, like a laugh, was being perceived as condescending by others? How would you approach coaching them through that, and what steps would you take to guide their self awareness journey?
yeah. Well, when you think about self-awareness, like that's a big topic, and there was a very interesting article in the Harvard Business Review, and I think it was January 2018, that said in their study that the higher you go up the ladder, the less self-aware you likely are, right? Because the higher you're up, the more people are less likely to tell you the truth. And that's fair, right? Like, it is not, I think, in my opinion, it is not reasonable for leaders to think that, particularly the people that are working for them, but even their colleagues, are going to be completely truthful with them around what makes them difficult to work with. Because it's not, we can be friendly at work, but while you're working together, it's a financial interdependence in a corporation or in whatever organization. And so it's hard for people to be honest. It's hard for people to give feedback. And when people expect that from their direct reports, I think that's not fair. Um, and when you think about self-awareness, there's self-awareness of yourself and what's important to you, and how you think about things, and your own kind of internal weather system and your emotional regulation. And then there's also, I think, what they call like external self-awareness, of being aware of how other people perceive you and how other people find you to work with. And so there's different aspects of it. So in coaching someone, I mean, first you have to, if someone's, laughing, I think it's pretty obvious what I would do. And if I witnessed it, I believe in giving people feedback in the most clear but compassionate way possible, right? Like, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, and particularly her phrase, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So you have to, as a coach, you have the opportunity to be direct because you are a neutral party, right? And if you're a really good coach, then you have the courage to say the truth, which I would. Um, but I would also, in terms of getting to self-awareness in an organization and a leader, um, anonymous 360s are really important. I mean, that sometimes is the only way you're going to get a clue of what's really happening with this person. But also, I would encourage contemplative practices. Why do you need to laugh in these meetings? Where did you learn that tactic? um, if someone's open to that, I think we all have to take responsibility for our own self-awareness and understanding our own weather system and our own behaviors. And it's, it's unusual if someone becomes extremely successful without that, right? Like, so I would also want to inspire them to really work on it if they were working with me.
So it seems like there are two key aspects to this, right? First, you have to want the change. You need to start recognizing the need for it. But how do you know when a change is necessary? That's where feedback comes in. It could be feedback you actively seek out or something someone else shares with you. Take a 360 review, for example. In the case of that leader, they may not have realized their laugh is having a negative impact on others. A 360 could help bring that to light, but once that feedback is shared, the next step is crucial. How do you respond to it? It's easy to feel offended or shut down entirely, but that's where deeper self awareness comes in. Feedback isn't just criticism, it should be also constructive, right? So, what would your advice be for someone in this situation? How should they respond to unsolicited negative feedback? Should they take it seriously and work on it, or is it okay to disregard it if it wasn't something they specifically asked for?
Yeah, that's true. I think it depends on the situation, and I've seen a lot of instances of that. Most large organizations have some kind of employee survey that's going to give you some indicator of the satisfaction of the leader, which does get reported up, right? So sometimes that is an incentive for people to want to change, to want to understand, how they can be better colleagues in the workplace. Um, but sometimes not all feedback is accurate, right? Not all feedback is worth your time and attention. At least not all negative feedback. Sometimes the people, depending upon your work situation, the people working for you may have no idea what's happening, right? Like, I believe in being a very transparent leader, particularly with my direct reports. But there are times when you're going through acquisitions or mergers and you're legally bound to not disclose what's happening. And instances like that, they may not be happy with something you're doing because they don't see the larger picture, right? And sometimes that's just unfortunate. But that's why, anyone who would work with me, I would really encourage a contemplative practice, because you have to develop the wisdom to understand what feedback is worth your attention and what feedback is not. Right? A coach is not here to tell you what to do. That's not what great coaches do. Great coaches listen very, very deeply, and they hold up a mirror to you that helps you see what needs to be different in your life for your life to be better in whatever way, or a career to be better in any way. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Often we are our own harshest critics, right? So when we receive negative feedback, it's easy to assume it's true, even though it might just be one person's opinion without any real basis. Knowing how to discern what to accept and what to let go of, and creating a space between the two, is such a valuable advice. Sherry, this has been such an insightful conversation so far. Your reflections on navigating feedback, self awareness, and fostering genuine connections have been incredibly impactful. I know our listeners are walking away with so much to think about, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your journey and lessons from your incredible career. We'll pause here for now and wrap up part one, but don't go anywhere because part two is where we'll explore another exciting dimension of Cherie's work. Thank you for tuning in to Voices of Introspection. I'll see you in the next episode as we continue exploring the transformative power of introspection. Until then, take care and keep growing.